What if everything you admire is a lie? They said she was strong, stoic, unbreakable. But what if that calm face hid something darker? What if society has confused emotional manipulation with emotional control? In this video, I'll expose how many of the most powerful women in history, and even today, aren't Stoics at all. They're something far more dangerous, and by the end, you'll start questioning the truth behind every strong woman image you've ever seen. Let's think about what it really means to be Stoic, because the modern world has taken that term, twisted it, flattened it, and turned it into a buzzword. But Stoicism, in its true form, is something ancient, powerful, and deeply moral. It's not just about emotional restraint. It's about confronting chaos and choosing virtue in the face of it. That's what Marcus Aurelius did, what Epictetus taught. And yet, somehow, in the modern and even historical narratives of powerful women, we've started confusing something very different for Stoicism. We've started mistaking narcissism for wisdom, emotional coldness for strength, and self-obsession for self-mastery. Now, here's the paradox, because narcissism doesn't wear a crown of arrogance. Not always. Sometimes it wears silence. Sometimes it looks like composure. Sometimes it looks like exactly what we've been taught to admire. But the motivation underneath, that's where the truth lives. Stoicism is rooted in humility, in accepting the limits of one's control, in recognizing the self as part of something larger. Narcissism, on the other hand, cannot stand being unseen. It feeds on illusion. It postures control, not from a sense of inner peace, but from a fear of vulnerability. And when a woman, especially a powerful woman, displays this calculated composure, we often applaud her. We call her strong. We call her stoic. But are we really seeing her for who she is? Take a look at how history celebrates certain women. Think about Cleopatra, for example. She's remembered for her grace, her diplomacy, her almost mystical calm in the face of collapse. But when you strip away the romanticism and the propaganda, you find something far more complex. She wasn't just calm, she was calculating. She wasn't just composed, she was controlling. Her identity was curated like a brand. And when things started to fall apart, it wasn't virtue that guided her. It was the maintenance of an image. That's not Stoicism. That's survival by manipulation. And yet, we love that image, don't we? Because in a world that values performance over principle, what looks like power often takes precedence over what is strength. And this confusion doesn't just distort how we see historical figures. It damages how modern women are taught to model themselves. When you confuse the narcissist's mask for the Stoic's face, you reward ego. You reward disconnection. You reward a form of emotional dishonesty, packaged as empowerment. But let's be clear, true Stoicism is not about being unbothered. It's not about shutting down your emotions to appear untouchable. It's about feeling everything, enduring everything, and still choosing to respond with reason, integrity, and humility. That's hard. It requires discipline. It requires confronting your own capacity for darkness, not projecting it onto others. A Stoic doesn't need the world to know they're in control. They are in control precisely because they've relinquished the illusion that control is owed to them. Now compare that to narcissism, which thrives on exactly the opposite. The narcissist is obsessed with maintaining a sense of superiority. They appear calm because they're terrified of being exposed. They withhold not out of strength, but because revealing too much would unravel their image. They dominate conversations with silence, not to understand others, but to assert dominance through detachment. And in the age of Instagram aesthetics, curated confidence, and hashtag empowerment, we are constantly bombarded with that same illusion. People, especially women, being praised for a calm exterior that hides an anxious, fragile ego inside. This matters. It matters because the values we celebrate become the values we replicate. And if young women are taught that to be powerful means to be detached, superior, and emotionally unavailable, then we are cultivating a generation that will mistake pride for peace and control for character. It's a dangerous reversal, because society needs stoic strength, not empty image building, not the performance of emotional invulnerability, but actual integrity, actual humility, actual self-restraint, not for attention but for virtue. The truth is, the line between Stoicism and Narcissism isn't always visible. It's subtle. It lives in motivation, not appearance. But if you pay attention, really pay attention, you'll start to see it. In the way someone handles criticism, in whether they seek to serve or to shine, in whether they suffer quietly or make their suffering a spectacle. And when you can see it, you can begin to tell the difference between true power and its imitation. Because in the end, real strength doesn't demand applause. It simply stands, unshaken, unseen if necessary, but unshakable. For power is seductive, it always has been. And when it's paired with admiration, with public attention, with the illusion of invincibility, it becomes something incredibly dangerous. Not just for those who wield it, but for the culture that celebrates it. And this is especially true when we talk about women in positions of power, because there's a strange cultural tension there. For centuries, women were excluded from the traditional centers of power. So when they finally broke through, there was an urgency to celebrate it, to amplify it, and that's understandable. But in our rush to applaud every instance of female empowerment, we've started to overlook something deeply important: the intention behind the power. There's a fundamental difference between power that comes from virtue and power that comes from ego, between leadership that lifts others and leadership that centers the self. One serves something higher. The other serves only the mirror. And what's happening now, and what's always happened, if we look closely enough, is that narcissism has slipped in under the banner of empowerment. It's wearing the same clothes, speaking the same language, but its motivations couldn't be more different. You see, real empowerment, authentic, earned power, is about responsibility. It's grounded in sacrifice. It doesn't need recognition to function. But narcissistic power, that's all about image. It thrives on admiration, applause, and dominance. It's performative. It postures as strength, but at its core, it's fragile, because it's built on an illusion that you are somehow superior, chosen, untouchable. And that illusion can be intoxicating, not just for the one living inside it, but for the people watching. That's what makes narcissism so powerful, because it often looks like confidence. It looks like fearlessness. And in a culture obsessed with visibility, that image gets rewarded over and over again. But it's empty. It doesn't build. It doesn't nourish. It consumes. Now contrast that with someone operating from genuine inner strength. There's a quiet there, a steadiness, a refusal to be shaken by praise or blame. That kind of strength doesn't need a stage. It doesn't need to control or dominate. It leads by example, not by force. And here's the thing, because this is where it gets real. When women step into power, they are often forced to choose between these two models. Do they become the image, or do they build something real? Too many choose the image. Not because they're evil or weak, but because the world rewards the image far more aggressively than it rewards substance. And that's the trap. That's how narcissism disguises itself as progress. It offers shortcuts. It offers admiration without responsibility. It offers fame without foundation. And in the end, it always implodes. History has shown us both paths. Rosa Parks, she didn't scream for attention. She didn't posture. She sat. She sat with quiet defiance, grounded in something so much deeper than ego. She didn't need to be famous. She needed to be right. And because of that, her influence lasted. Her strength wasn't in her volume. It was in her values. Now compare that to figures who crumble under the weight of their own self-worship. People, both historical and modern, who build empires on charisma, on charm, on manipulation. Their legacy doesn't last, because their power wasn't rooted in anything real. It was an echo chamber of their own inflated sense of self. And this matters, not just historically, but right now, because we are shaping what power looks like for the next generation of women. We are deciding through our praise and our silence whether we will elevate those who serve or those who demand to be served. And if we keep confusing self-worship with self-mastery, we're going to end up with a world that's loud, impressive, and deeply empty. Because here's the truth. The narcissist believes they are destined to lead. The Stoic earns the right to lead through service, through discipline, through humility. One shouts their greatness. The other proves it, quietly, patiently, and without asking for applause. So ask yourself, what kind of power are you drawn to? What kind of power do you celebrate? Because what you admire is what you become. And if we want to build a culture of real strength, not just power, but strength, then we have to start rewarding the people who are building something greater than themselves. Not the ones just building themselves up. True power isn't about who stands tallest. It's about who stands longest, especially when no one is watching. For you said, we're living in a time where identity is no longer discovered. It's curated, it's filtered, it's branded. And nowhere is this more visible, more exaggerated than on social media. Platforms that were once tools for connection have become stages for performance. They reward not truth, but presentation. Not substance, but style. And in this world of endless comparison and virtual applause, something dangerous is happening. A new kind of archetype is emerging. She's confident, she's cold, she's in control. She tells you she doesn't care what people think. She calls herself stoic. But behind that mask, more often than not, is a deeply insecure narcissist playing the part of someone emotionally invincible. And we're buying it. Every day, we're liking the posts, sharing the reels, echoing the quotes. Cut off everyone who drains your energy. Never explain, never apologize. Move in silence. They'll never know your next move. Phrases that sound profound, but are often just hollow mantras for emotional detachment and unchecked ego. The kind of content that wears the clothes of wisdom, but is rooted in fear. Fear of vulnerability, fear of being ordinary, fear of facing the messy, chaotic reality of human relationships. That's not Stoicism. That's not strength. That's a spiritual shell game, because Stoicism, real Stoicism, is about confronting the chaos of life with grace and humility. It's not about becoming untouchable. It's about becoming disciplined in your emotions, not disconnected from them. But social media doesn't reward discipline. It rewards drama. It rewards extreme confidence, even if it's fake. And so what we're seeing now is the rise of a generation mimicking strength without understanding what strength actually is. You watch these influencers and public figures speak with certainty about life, relationships, success, as if they've transcended the human experience, as if pain no longer affects them, as if needing others is a weakness. And it's so seductive, because we all want that kind of control. We all want to believe there's a way to be above the chaos. But the truth is, no one is. Not really. And pretending to be is a form of self-deception that leads nowhere but loneliness. And yet, these online personalities continue to grow. Millions of followers. Thousands of comments calling them queens, icons, unstoppable. The worship of this carefully packaged detachment becomes the standard. And young women, especially, internalize it. They start to believe that the less you care, the more powerful you are. That cutting people off is strength, that emotional distance is wisdom. And slowly, they lose the ability to connect in any real, meaningful way. It becomes a kind of emotional anorexia, starving themselves of vulnerability in order to maintain an image of control. But control over what? Their image, their pain, the approval of strangers they'll never meet. And here's where it gets truly dangerous. Social media doesn't just reflect culture. It shapes it. It becomes the teacher, the role model, the new philosopher. And when narcissism wears a stoic mask, it teaches people to chase an ideal that looks like strength, but is really just emotional isolation. It teaches people that being admired is more important than being known, that being respected is more valuable than being understood. But at some point, that illusion cracks, because life will test you. It always does. No filter can shield you from grief. No follow account can protect you from betrayal. No curated persona can carry you through real pain. And when those moments come, and they will, the people who've built their identity on detachment will find they've built on sand. Because in the end, it's not about who looks strong. It's about who is strong. And strength isn't loud. It's not made of angles and lighting and self-help slogans wrapped in self-importance. It's built quietly over time, through hard choices and private battles, through moments when no one's watching and the applause has faded, but you still choose to do the right thing anyway. So when you scroll, when you watch, when you feel that pull toward the glamorous calm of those digital goddesses, pause. Ask yourself, is this strength, or is it performance? Is this stoicism, or is it ego wearing a wise face? Because if we don't learn to tell the difference, we'll lose something vital. We'll raise a generation more interested in being untouchable than in being real. And that's not empowerment. That's exile from connection, from authenticity, from the richness of human experience. Real power doesn't come from pretending you feel nothing. It comes from learning how to feel everything, and still choosing who you want to be. There's something deeply human about our desire to be seen, to be valued, to feel significant. It's not weakness, it's part of what binds us together. But when that need becomes central to someone's identity, when their entire sense of worth is tied to how others perceive them, then we enter dangerous territory, because significance pursued for its own sake is a trap. It doesn't satisfy. It feeds on itself. And it's in that trap that narcissism thrives, often disguised, especially today, as empowerment. This is where the confusion between Stoicism and narcissism becomes most tragic. You see, true Stoic strength doesn't demand to be noticed. It operates on principle, not performance. It's guided by internal clarity, not external validation. But narcissism is hungry, always. And in its most refined form, it looks just like control. It looks like power. But it's not. It's an addiction to significance dressed up as virtue. And this addiction isn't rare. It's everywhere. It's embedded in the way we reward boldness over humility, spectacle over substance. It's in the way we teach people, especially women, that value lies in being admired rather than being grounded. So they learn to curate a personality. They learn to perform competence. They learn to protect the image at all costs, even if underneath they're falling apart, even if they're isolated, even if they feel like imposters. But here's the truth no one wants to say out loud. You can't be deeply known and endlessly admired at the same time. Those things pull in opposite directions. Admiration often comes from distance, from mystery, from performance. But being known, that requires honesty, vulnerability, and a willingness to admit you don't have it all together, that you don't always know what you're doing, that you are, in fact, human. Now look back through history. Think of the women who actually changed things, who made a mark not because they demanded attention, but because they lived in service of something larger than themselves. They weren't flawless. They didn't pretend to be. They didn't need to be adored to keep going. What drove them wasn't ego. It was conviction. They weren't trying to win the crowd. They were trying to tell the truth. And truth-telling, real truth-telling, is dangerous because it makes you visible in a different way. It doesn't build applause, it exposes you. And yet that's where real power lies. In that terrifying, naked place where you say, "This is who I am. This is what I stand for," even if no one claps. And that's where Stoicism diverges completely from Narcissism. Because Stoicism calls you to truth. It demands that you see things as they are, not as you wish they were. It invites you to carry the burden of responsibility, not chase the comfort of applause. The Stoic is content to act in the shadows if that's what the situation demands. She doesn't need to be praised. She needs to live rightly. But the narcissist, she needs the crowd. She can't exist without the mirror of others. Her sense of worth is external, and so she's constantly adapting, constantly posturing. She may look stoic, composed, independent, serene, but it's a performance designed to hold admiration in place. And when admiration fades, so does her strength. That's why this confusion is so dangerous, because when we glorify this facade, this carefully engineered emotional armor, we're not teaching people to be resilient. We're teaching them to perform resilience. We're teaching them to look strong instead of being strong. And the cost of that illusion is enormous. Because when the trials come, and they always come, performance won't save you. Likes won't comfort you. The applause won't carry you through grief, or loss, or failure. You will be left with yourself. And in that moment, what matters isn't how admired you are. It's how honest you are. It's whether you built your strength on truth or on ego. So we have a choice to make. As individuals, as a culture, we can keep confusing self-importance with self-respect. We can keep elevating those who perform calm while hiding deep insecurity. Or we can start honoring something deeper, something quieter, something real. Because real power, real feminine power, real human power, is not in being untouchable. It's in being unshakable because you've touched the truth and refused to look away. And when you do that, when you trade performance for purpose, you don't just gain strength, you become it. So, what have we really been talking about here? Not just the clash between Stoicism and Narcissism, but something far more vital. The crisis of authenticity in power, especially when it comes to the modern expression of female strength. We live in an era that elevates image over essence, where detachment is mistaken for emotional mastery, where curated personas replace earned character, and that confusion between depth and display, between discipline and dominance, has become so culturally accepted, so algorithmically rewarded, that we no longer see it for what it is, a lie, a subtle, seductive, socially endorsed lie. We began by looking at the mask, how narcissism has learned to imitate Stoicism with startling accuracy. The calm posture, the confident speech, the icy resolve. It's convincing, but it's hollow, because real Stoicism doesn't come from arrogance. It comes from humility, not from avoidance of emotion, but from the courageous regulation of it. It's not about being untouchable. It's about being prepared, not for praise, but for pain, for responsibility, for life. Then we turn to social media, where that mask is manufactured, sold, and worshipped at scale. A world where attention is currency and self-worship is framed as wisdom. But the danger isn't just in the fakeness. It's in the aspiration. When millions start imitating a persona that lacks any connection to truth, compassion, or responsibility, we're not building stronger people. We're building emotionally fragile echo chambers of ego dressed up as empowerment. And it doesn't stop there. The hunger for significance, left unchecked, turns even good people into hollow leaders. Performers, not builders. They forget that real power is quiet. That truth doesn't trend. And that being deeply admired is not the same as being deeply respected. One fades, the other forms character. The question we must ask now is not who looks strong, who sounds confident, or who dominates the conversation. The question is who endures, who holds the line when no one is watching, who sacrifices comfort to stay in alignment with what is right. That's what defines true strength, the ability to stand for something greater than yourself, even when it hurts, even when you're alone, even when the applause turns to silence. Because in the end, it's not about whether you're praised or punished, not about whether you're followed or forgotten. What matters is whether you've chosen the path of meaning over the path of mirrors, whether you've done the brutally hard work of becoming someone with depth, with substance, with soul. That is what separates the narcissist from the Stoic, not appearance, not language, but the core, what they serve. One serves the self, the other serves the truth. And the world desperately needs more people, especially more women, who are willing to serve the truth. Because when the storm comes, when the illusions collapse, when the masks crack, it won't be the loudest voice that stands firm. It will be the one grounded in something real.